Hey, everybody. Here's for another session on hybrid and remote success. Today, we're going to be talking about how to hire a people team for remote culture success. So, it's how to build a people team. If you're 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people, uh, you know, we all are here because we want to drive engagement, performance, and culture. But it could be so challenging within a distributed team, especially if you're new to remote work or hybrid work. Remote work, it's, end of the day, it's not a part. It's not an event calendar. It's a set of principles and culture that can drive your organization forward. So we want to design a people team that drives manager quality, communication systems, onboarding, rewards, operating rhythm. And we're going to be talking about all of those things today in our session. So it's helping you as an HR team move from that office first HR to a remote ready people operating model and how to hire people to do that. I think we all know when you hire one person who's an A player, they'll hire five more A players. And then those A players hire more A players, right? So it's so critical from the offset to have the right people there. Um, so before we go into all the details, I just want to mention that my name's Alex Grandy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Recognize, recognizeapp.com. It's an employee recognition and rewards platform. We've been dedicated and focused on the distributed workforce, hybrid and remote work for about a decade now. That's where a recognition program that's a solution like ours really comes to shine. If you're all in one office together, it's so easy to have that great culture, that kind of water cooler environment. You can even just have a bulletin board, right? But when you grow, and especially if you have multiple locations, or maybe you have people who are deskless or people who are now working remotely, it becomes so much more of a challenge. So I'm very passionate about these topics around motivation and organizational development. So just want to mention that if you have any questions or anything in this session, that's why we're in a live demo. We have about 30 people here. We're all here together at the same time. There's a reason we're all here together. So I would love, it looks like Steve has kicked it off. I'd love to have you share where you are in the world and what does your company do? Promote your brand, give your elevator pitch, put that in the chat. So I see some Florida, Minneapolis, love Minnesota. Last summer, I got to go up north to a friend's cabin in Minnesota. It was so beautiful. I'd never been up north. It was on, I think it's called Seven Lakes. All these lakes connect to different lakes. It was so beautiful. Oregon, awesome. I was just in Portland, dog sitting for a couple of weeks. Bounced around. I'm actually in Austin, Texas right now, celebrating my friend's birthday. My birthday is next week, turning the big 43. But normally I'm in Seattle. So I do bounce around a lot. I'm going to be at the Great Place to Work conference in 2 weeks in Vegas. So if you're going to be at the Great Place to Work conference, love to reach out, love to meet, have a coffee, have a tea, and connect. Indianapolis. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so reach out to Tiffany if you want to do cybersecurity, you need help with that. Reach out to Tiffany. Same with Barb. Look at that cybersecurity company. I love the technology, cybersecurity. I mean, what a growing field. Great field to be in for sure. Awesome. So keep it up in the chat. Please keep asking any questions. We have people here in the chat to help facilitate those questions and make sure I notice them as I'm going through our presentation. So without further ado, let's go into the main topics here. So, I just want to make sure that we level set on what this webinar is about. It's meant as a practical session for leaders who need to make hiring decisions for success in the remote and work environment. And we're going to cover a lot today. Now, it's probably going to, we have an hour, but maybe shorter than that, depending on how quickly we go through the content. But you should walk away. I promise you'll walk away with concrete ideas, examples, and strategies for hiring people teams. Things like organization design, role scorecards, interview questions, take-home challenges, and how I go about those, and a rollout roadmap. And again, I'm going to present org chart for your people team at 100 people to over 1,000 people. But just kind of stepping back a little bit, I feel like hiring is an art. Um, put a one in the chat. Just put a one and hit enter in the chat if you've made a hire and then day one, maybe the first 5 minutes, you're like, uh-oh, I made a mistake, right? It's always going to happen. You can't always hire the right people. But if we have a structured approach, we should have less of that, right? It's always going to happen. But just to share a couple stories of my own, my business partner, his name's Peter Phillips, right? And sometimes we both interview a candidate, or maybe, he'll be hiring somebody and I'll interview them at some point in the process, or vice versa. And I hired someone onto the team, and then, they had met with Peter, and Peter was going to help them with the kind of technical onboarding. And so after I hired them, I said, here's Peter in an email. He's going to help you with the onboarding. And this person wrote back, hello, Phillips. It's these little things that you just kind of like, wait, what? His name's Peter. His name's not Phillips. It didn't say Mr. Phillips. It just said Phillips. It's like, that's kind of odd. But then you just kind of ignore it, you kind of just like whatever, and you ignore it and keep moving forward. Right. And then within 6 months, it's a disaster and you have to let them go, or they leave on their own. Right. And another time, like immediately after hiring them, I noticed there was a problem, was another person I hired. And then when I called this person to say, hey, you got the job, they didn't hang up and they said, I got the job, yay. And then they hung up. And I thought, well, this person's going to be a sales rep. Is that going to happen on other sales calls where they celebrate the sale still on the phone? And then that person didn't work out, right? So it's so interesting how these things can come up right from the very beginning, right when it happens. And these are the type of things that you want to avoid, but it's almost impossible to avoid. But I feel like, from my experience from years now of hiring, that I'm getting better and better at it. And at one point, I thought, well, if you go after people at higher salary ranges, people who are making a lot more money, that the problems will go away. Well, actually, you trade one problem for a new problem. We've hired people who are very senior, very expensive, high caliber people, and then you discover within the first week that they have an anger problem because, well, they weren't yelling at you in the in the interviewing process, but once you hire them, now they're yelling at you. And then these types of learnings is why we put in documentation on code of conduct and company values. This is why one of our values at our company is being an ally, right? Hey, I don't feel like you're being an ally right now, right? That kind of thing. Yelling is not being an ally. So let's go into some things that we can do systematically to try to avoid these things. Can't always avoid them, but at least try to limit them. And then, ideally, this is a specific topic around building remote success. Why does this matter right now? Why does remote work matter? Why are we all here together? Well, here in the United States, about 35 million people teleworked in Q1 of 2024. That's about 23% of workers, up from 20% the previous year. So even though we're post-COVID, people are still teleworking more than ever. At the same time, share of teleworkers doing all hours at home actually fell a little bit, which is interesting, whereas some hours rose. So I think that's why we see that the hybrid work it's a strong signal that hybrid is a durable middle ground between fully remote and hybrid. I think we all know that working completely remotely, can be lonely. And so coming in at least a couple of days a week is impactful. I once interviewed somebody and I said, why are you applying to work at Recognize? There's so many reasons to say that you want to work at Recognize. You want to work at a company that builds culture for organizations. We're doing feel good work here. It's a great product to work for. And they said, I want to work for you because it said remote. Well, that's not enough reason to work for somebody just because you want to stay at home and sit on the couch, right? You need to have a better reason than that. Stanford did a study with Trip.com, and they found that hybrid workers were just as productive, just as likely to be promoted, and actually 33% less likely to quit than their office-only peers. Separate work from home research finds that workers value a 2-day-a-week remote option at roughly 8% of wages, which I think explains why flexibility changes the attraction and the retention economics. Um, I think, on our team, because we are a fully remote team right now, that's why we have people, once we find that they meet the culture, they work hard, they're dedicated, they think critically. That's why we have people here that been working here 5, 6 years. We're a 10-year company, but in the first number of years, we're a self-started, self-funded organizations. The first number of years, it really was just 2 or 3 people. So the people that we have hired, they stick around. They love working here, and we give great benefits on things like paternity and maternity leave. So, and I think these are important. We'll talk about benefits as well in this session here. So, what does remote culture success really look like? So, we define culture success as a business outcome and a human outcome. You need to care about both, right? I just can't stand organizations that seem to only care about the business outcomes and not the people outcomes. I don't know if it was true, but I saw a image recently. It said, like, hey, we do snacks every week. We have a snack day at our company. This week's snack is mayonnaise. I'm sure that's a joke. You can't possibly have that be an actual snack. But I think it's telling, or you've seen at Walmart where they have like GoFundMe's to help people pay for basic services. How about just pay people a living wage? Right. So I care deeply about my staff. It's part of the reason why I started Recognize was not only to help other companies with culture, but to be able to be a job creator and to help people have fulfilling lives who are my team as well. So what I mean by all this is, for instance, Gallup, they did a meta-analysis in 2024. They found that highly engaged teams were associated with higher well-being, productivity, profitability, and lower turnover. So it's a win-win. Years ago, it's on our website, but years ago, we did a study and found that when employees are recognized and celebrated, nurses specifically, they have lower mental health issues, right? So higher well-being is so important in the organization. Gallup also says that managers account for 70% of variance of team engagement, which is why it's so important to have a people team that has a design for manager excellence early on. We want to be training our managers, and we've been doing topics on that in the webinars as well. Not the main topic today, but I just want to mention that your people team needs to be supporting your managers. And remote work creates upsides and has risk at the same time. There's a technology company called Buffer, and I'm going to be talking about them a lot in this webinar because they've done some studies, and they found a majority of remote workers felt engaged, but many report that there's career growth friction sometimes. It can be hard for visibility, right, when you're not physically seen. I went out recently on a date, I'll be honest, and this person worked at Starbucks, and they were saying that they actually ostracize the remote workers. So, I think we really need to do the opposite. We want to have a cohesive culture no matter where people work and be able to have that career growth, but potential. And we're going to talk about some things about that in this call and also in previous webinars and future webinars. It's a big topic to make sure that no matter where you work, you are seen and valued. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 design principles for remote ready people team. And by the way, this presentation, we're going to send it over either as a link. You can see, it's the internal link here in the URL, but we can send it as a PDF as well or a PowerPoint. So let us know what format you want, but we'll be sending something out after the call to everybody. But there's a company called GitLab. It's another tech company, and they have an async handbook. And I think it's really useful as a model. It things like document everything, work across time zones intentionally, reduce the need for people to be online to be effective, right? Online, like the green dot in Teams or Slack. That shouldn't be an indicator of, if you're a manager and you're checking to see if an employee's green dot is green or hollow or it's just empty, there's already a problem, right? So, this is just an operating logic that for remote ready people teams that should be part of the process. Microsoft, they did a study of their 60,000 employees, and they found remote work made collaboration networks more static and siloed with fewer bridges between groups. So that means the people team cannot rely on informal office spillover. It has to be, you have to build structure for connection, documentation, and cross-functional coordination. So here is kind of the main roles within a remote ready org chart for your people team. I would love to do a poll right now. I'm curious, Ru, if you want to pull the poll up now on this topic, and then we'll go through some of these. But which role do you wish you could hire next on your people team? I'm really curious to see what people think. Always the drum roll, please. I'm always anxious to see the results. The polls are always so interesting. Sometimes I'm surprised, sometimes I'm not. I'm going to guess people analytics. I'm going to guess maybe employee experience. We'll see. I'm curious. All right. Let's see. Let's see what the results are. Getting antsy, getting anxious. Okay, yeah, a bit of across the board. 30% or so said HR business partner. The number one that's telling is total rewards. Music to my ears as someone who works in total rewards space. 20% employee experience. So I was wrong. I was going to say people analytics. Excuse me. But people analytics, only 7% said that'd be the next hire. Well, the key message is remote culture. Remote team culture success does not come from hiring one culture person, right? It comes from a people system, clear ownership for hiring, onboarding, manager quality, which is huge, communication, also a big one for remote teams, fairness, another important one, and measurement. I'm going to be talking about some of these things in this webinar. As an organization, AOE, I'm sorry, AON, sorry, they reported that benefits communication is among the top internal strategies for multinational organizations. And Gallup shows managers drive engagement variance. I think we all know you join the company and leave a manager, right? Together, those findings justify a broader people org that it's not just recruiters and generalists. And I'm going to talk about when to hire these people, but I put descriptions in the different roles, so you can just kind of get a sense of what those are. I'm sure you have many of those people already on your team, depending on the size of your organization. But let's keep it going. Second here. Okay. So let's talk about if you're at about 100 people in your company, who you should be hiring. So this is a starting template. It's not a hard rule, obviously, but at around 100 people, one of the biggest mistakes is over-investing in admin and under-investing in the hiring quality. And so we're going to be talking about how to increase that quality in this session. But you also want to invest in the onboarding, right? And also definitely in the manager capacity. So SHRM says that the average HR to employee ratio is around 1.7 HR to 100 employees, with kind of a better sweet spot to be between 1.5 to 4 HR to 100 employees. For distributed teams, you often keep the internal team lean, but use vendor capacity for payroll, compliance, or admin, or recognition, while protecting internal ownership, hiring, or onboarding, and manager systems, right? Buffer, the tech company I mentioned, they argue for early structure than many office first teams expect. So, remote or hybrid is definitely possible. It just takes a bit more work and structure. Weird, the image broke. Not that, weird. That's unfortunate. So I was on kind of make a joke a little bit that about I had a picture of the HR person in the TV show Silicon Valley. I love that TV show. It's just so in line with my life and what happens. So in the TV show Silicon Valley, they start off as just a startup, but they end up with about 100 people on their team, and they hire an HR person. And I love the episodes with the HR person because she's so crafty, she's so clever. She uses strategies to get people to be productive, no matter how difficult the employee is. So if you're ever on a plane or anything and they have TV shows, find one of the later seasons of Silicon Valley, find the HR episode. It's so good. It just shows the power of having that like killer people team and how it can ripple throughout the whole organization. Um, but so let's move on to, let's say you have 500 people. All right, 500 people is a different beast than 100 people. And at 500 people, that's when culture stops being informal and starts being a systems dependent, and manager quality, and onboarding quality, and internal communications become leverage points for you. So in Microsoft's onboarding research, they found that new hires remain connected, remain less connected than their tenured employees during the first onboarding period, unless they're incorporated into those social events and those virtual water coolers. And I'm going to talk more about the virtual water coolers a bit more, but I will touch on that a little bit now. And so Harvard Business School, HBS, they found that a well-designed virtual water cooler with senior managers improved newcomer onboarding, improved newcomer performance and career outcomes. So you want to be able to keep people connected inside the organization from day one, and you do that through virtual water coolers. Okay, so now let's say you're at around 1,000 people, right? At scale, the remote complexity becomes more than culture. It's all about fairness, communication, and risk management. So there's an organization called WTW, and they found flexible work arrangements are a meaningful reason why employees stay. So letting people choose when and where they work in the hybrid environment is critical. So you need to teach that to managers. Some managers will not understand that internally. They'll be used to that office first environment where you're there from 9 to 5. If you're not visible 9 to 5, I mean, personally, from working remotely, I work from, let's say, 8 to 1, and then I take an hour break. I may take a nap. I will be completely honest, I love naps, and more research is showing that it really is powerful, because I basically have 2 work sessions, and both work sessions, or maybe 3 work sessions a day, and those work sessions are highly, highly productive. When I used to work in an office 9 to 5, right? After lunch, things slowed down. Everybody's a little sluggish. You see people going to the break room or the vending machine or the snacks, right? You see people chatting more, right? By 4 o'clock, people are pretty tired. People are looking at their watches, waiting to leave. Is that what you really want, right? And the hybrid environment allows you to choose when to work. Instead of rushing home to try to get done all the chores, you can do that as your break. You can put a load of laundry in when you work remotely as a break. It could be, between micro tasks. So you want to have a culture that supports that. And this will heavily influence both the attraction of critical staff that maybe have families, right? And their retention, as we mentioned earlier. So it's been found that 60% of multinationals are designing and implementing global minimum benefit strategies. This is why enterprise distributed workforces or companies need mature total rewards, communication, and compliance capabilities. I'm actually going to take a moment to just share what it looks like to use something like Recognize. So, if you're in a hybrid environment, we have it set up so that if you're deskless, you can get a text message from us. of when you've been recognized. Or if you're a manager, you can be reminded to recognize somebody. And then it can all live within Outlook, right? Or it can live within Microsoft Teams or in SharePoint or Slack. You don't want to have to go to another website. You can avoid it. And then still have those types of views. This is a view that shows up on TVs that scrolls through the recognitions, right? People can submit challenges on the go from their phone. If you have drivers, they can report when they've had a successful quarter of driving, right? And then no matter where they are, they can see who's the top employee over time around the values of the organization. Or they can redeem a day off, or they can get a gift card through us using the points they've earned from their anniversaries, or they can buy concert tickets or go to a baseball game. This is how we do things at Recognize on our team, and also is how we help other companies create that culture of recognition and to celebrate the successes. So if you want to learn more about that, we'll have a link at the end to reach out to us, or just go to recognizeapp.com. But let's keep going here. So that's 1,000 person teams. So now let's talk a little bit about each of those roles I mentioned before and how to hire some of these people. So for the people partner, right? We want to reframe this role as just manager infrastructure, not policy administration, right? In remote settings, this person must replace hallway fixes with repeatable systems. And that's what's so critical, repeatable systems. And when things are documented, written down on those repeatable systems, they can be reviewed over time and updated. You're never going to get anything right the first time and perfectly. Things are always in iterations. Launch early, adjust, and learn, right? Gallup says managers account for, again, as I mentioned before, 70% of that manager variance, or that engagement variance, rather. So important, right? Microsoft shows that remote work reduces spontaneous cross-group bridging. So again, we got to create ways to do that. You have to be deliberate with remote team. You can't just hope for the best as we wish we could, right? So that is exactly why remote people partners need strong coaching. They need to provide strong coaching to the managers. They need to have great documentation in your knowledge base. As I mentioned on previous webinars, we use Notion for our knowledge base, but you can use Confluence or whatever you do to have documentation accessible. In the last webinar, I'm not gonna do it again in case you were, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but we hooked up an AI chatbot to our employee handbook, right, to our documentation. So if anyone is in Teams or Slack, depending on where you are, or maybe you go right to the knowledge base, you can just ask a question now and have it like semi-intelligent question, a conversation rather, with your employee handbook. Like, how crazy is that? So we need systems that instruct on how to move from office first to remote or driven organizations. So the next role is the talent acquisition, right? So the organization buffer, as I mentioned before, they found that among the remote workers looking for a new job, remote capacity mattered materially in what they considered next, right? That means remote clarity is not a side issue in the candidate experience. So it can be a strategic asset for you that you are a hybrid environment, that you let people have that flexibility, right? And this is part of how you sell your organization. I think it's so important. I was just talking to a colleague who's an entrepreneur, and I asked, hey, I'm going into a webinar on, hiring, remote teams. What is something that you do that is that really leads to success? And he said, well, again, can't always hire every person to be perfect in the role, but the job description is so critical. There's a book on Amazon. What is it? I think it's called Who. It's an interviewing book, and it talks about making the job description being almost like a living document, right? You want to be able to use that job description throughout that person's career. So often job descriptions are like as if you're applying to work for a band or be an astronaut or something, right? How about just like, hey, we're chill, nice people, and here's what success looks like in this role, at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, right? Put that into the job description. Keep coming back to the job description. Job description should be used in the performance review. So if you put all that work up front, things are easier later on. It's like kind of like gardening, right? If you till the soil, you put in great nutrients, you plant at the right time, then you can just sit back and watch things grow, right? And that's the same thing with your teams. So use structured interviews. So a structured interview is hiring where it's a methodology for hiring where every candidate is asked the same set of predetermined questions in the same order and evaluated against a standard rating system. I have a golden retriever right here at my leg, so she's a bit distracting. Okay, not right now. I'm in a webinar, and now I'm getting a spam call. Okay, so use structured interviews is the big takeaway. So I also want to mention that Cambridge in 2023, they found that structured interviews has emerged as a predictor for the highest mean validity in a focal meta-analysis. So it's really important to use structured interviews. And I think it's really important when hiring to not have people ask the same questions. Have you ever gone into an interview and then you get to ask the same question and then you have to be like, well, I already answered that with the last person I met with. So unprofessional, right? And it's just puts a wrench in the whole process. So it's really important to do that. Another example is the Canadian Psychology Association. They found that structured interviews are more predictive than unstructured and reduce bias. I think that's really critical, is reducing bias. We're all human, right? We are subject to bias. No matter what you say about yourself or other people around you, we have unconscious biases that we may or may not even be aware of. And so by having structure, by being systematic, we can reduce these things. Awesome. So I'm obviously not reading everything on the screen. You can take a look at what we're saying. You take screenshots. We'll send you the notes after the call too. Okay. So moving on to the next role of the employee experience, something that obviously I care a lot about, internal communications. So in a remote environment, it's so important for communication to be clear. This person should not just be an events manager organizing the company picnic, right? It's the owner of the social infrastructure and message clarity in a distributed organization, right? It's so critical when things are oftentimes communicated on Microsoft Teams or Slack, or today I met with a company that they use WebEx for their communication. Whatever you use, it needs to be structured and have clarity. Again, the company Buffer, they identified that loneliness is one of the top struggles for remote work. And Gallup says that 20% of employees experience daily loneliness, with loneliness highest among remote workers. And Harvard Business School, they found that thoughtful design virtual water coolers, as mentioned before, can improve newcomer outcomes. So it's, again, really important that we do that. And that is the business case for giving community and communication a named owner, right? So critical to have that. Yeah, I mean, we have to train our managers to reach out to their direct reports. One of my popular posts on LinkedIn from years ago was don't message someone and say, as a manager, got a second, can we talk? Gosh, if I'm dating somebody and they text message me, can we talk? My cortisol levels go up, right? And that's the same thing for a manager. I used to have managers that would write me and go, can we talk? Okay. And my mind starts racing on what we're going to talk about, right? So I make always a point, can we talk about X? Do you have a moment? I want to talk about X. Oh, okay. So they want to talk about, scheduling a meeting or with a client or something benign, right? So those kinds of micro interactions, I think, are really important. So something to consider. Okay, next one is total rewards. Obviously, another one really important to me. Remote organizations create more visibility with fair questions, right? So you want to ask questions that are in line with their role. Obviously, employees notice when pay and benefits and policy are fuzzy. So obviously, if you're a small company under 10 people, there's always going to be not everything's going to be written down. Everything's going to be clear. Things are work in progress. And if you're hiring someone in a 10-person team, you're not going to want to hire someone who's used to a lot of structure. They're going to burn out more than a person who's like, yeah, no, I love working in ambiguous situations. I love wearing many hats. So these are the type of interview questions you want to ask. Like if you're a 10-person company versus 100 versus 1,000, the type of person you hire is going to kind of depend on that. Like if you're a 1,000-person company, I was going to interview once at Google. I decided not to because I was going to be responsible for the checkout page for businesses to be signing up for, Google Yellow Pages or whatever it was called at the time. I thought that was going to be so, such a limiting role that it wasn't for me. I'm more of a person who likes to work in a 20-person company or no more than 100 people. Personally, that's my personality. So, you want to hire people that fit these types of personalities. Another thing I want to mention is Buffer found that 43%, as it right there, say that pay was not tied to the location, and 70% said they were not paid less for working remotely. So I think you shouldn't be, pay should not be determined about where you work. We have talked about location-based compensation. If you're in California and have high taxes, you should be paid more than someone who lives in Washington, where I live, where there is no income tax, right? Even though Seattle is a very expensive city. So it's very complicated, but I'm saying the point here is not being paid based off of the city you work in, but your pay should not be determined about where that person works in office or remotely. So WTW found flexibility matters to retention. Again, employees with more benefit choices are more likely to say that the benefits meet their needs and that they'll recommend their employer. So, that can be a snowball effect where you hire, again, that A player who works well remotely. They love working for you, and now they're referring you to more people that they meet, right? I've worked at companies where they will pay me that $5,000 bonus just to get someone hired in their company. But if you have a great culture, people will recommend your organization to their friends and family. That employee net promoter score. How likely are you to recommend your friends and family to work here? If you're not asking that survey question at least on a quarterly basis, you should start. If you want Recognize to help you with that, we can do that. But definitely be using that as a indication of your company health. So I want to mention also that there's an organization called Owl Labs, and they found that hybrid workers spend on average $42 more per day when working from the office, which makes that commute travel policy part of the total, right? Something to focus on. I think we all know when we work in an office, you're running to work, you stop and get a bagel, you got to get gas. I saw today my Uber driver showed me that gas is almost $10 a gallon right now in California. Here in Austin, Texas, it's normally $2. Right now, it's over $4 a gallon. So something to be focused on. Hopefully, that's temporary for all of us, I'm sure. I noticed we're at 11:40 here, so I'm probably going to move a little bit quicker on some of the information, but we are almost to the end. So here's just a list of just traps you want to avoid. Right. So you can read through them on your own, but basically a remote version of an in-office policy or process usually looks polished, but produces hidden inequality. So some people are visible, some get context, and some are left out. So we want to avoid that. It's also interesting to note that, and as a fully remote team, it's almost like I don't want to hear this, like, plug my ears. But Stanford found that there's about 15 to 20% more ideas generated in a conference room, right, rather than in a virtual setting. And I know from some of my employees who are, maybe not as vocal on ideas, I'll take them out to dinner, we'll get a bottle of wine, and within an hour, they're just telling me all these great ideas that they wouldn't tell me if we were just in a Zoom for 15 minutes. So it's not that remote is bad, it's just that there's the right medium for the work. and you just can't assume that just one model works for everything. So, okay, a little bit about the hiring process that you can use to design. You can look through the steps here. But basically, we recommend that you have an async writing test, right? You talk about manager training, talk about system thinking, inclusion, judgment, change management. A study by the Canadian Psychology Association recommends that job analysis-based questions, consistent administration, standardized scoring, and interview training for structured interviews is so critical. And then GitLab's async guidance reinforces why a writing task matters in remote environments, why documentation matters. Explain to people why things are necessary. If anyone has any great interview questions, I'd love for you to share in the chat. Here's a handful of interview questions that we like here at Recognize. And actually, I was listening to a podcast on leadership, and they always ask every single person that they hire, how does your role make the organization money? How does what you do make money for the organization? It's kind of like that first principles concept. Break things down. Obviously, if you're a salesperson, it's an easy answer. But if you're, HR business partner, you want them to always be thinking about the bigger picture and see if they do that. So I'll keep moving along here. You can always take a screenshot or send you those questions. Take home challenges. So I was just talking to my colleague again, as I mentioned, we both agreed that we actually pay people to do take home challenges. We feel guilty making people do a ton of work. I know places like, let's say Facebook will make people do like a week-long intensive challenge. Pretty insane. That they make you, I get it. If you get a job, you can kind of change your career to work at a place like Meta or Google or something. But really, you should pay people. We pay people $100. My colleague says he pays people $200. I just feel so bad because people are, some people are out of work for 6 months at a time. It's so hard to get a job at times. And if you're doing, challenge after challenge after challenge, it's exhausting. So give a little bit back on that. But here's a handful of challenges that you can consider. For instance, rewrite an office first policy into a remote environment. See how people work. Kind of up to you if you want to do a time limit or not. Sometimes I like to not do the time limit because you can see how long it takes people to work. You can say this should take you a day or it should take you a few hours. But obviously if they really want the job, they're going to put more effort into it. So as far as onboarding goes, right? So here's two examples of what should happen. You should definitely have that 30-day, 60-day, 90-day KPIs and what that means. But basically, in remote settings, that onboarding is that networking opportunity, meeting with different people, creating connection. It's not just compliance, right? New hires need context and they need connection. You need to make those human capital investments and those technical solutions be part of the supporting of the socialization of that remote team, right? Make it feel comfortable to reach out to people. So again, having those virtual water coolers, connecting senior people with the new group of employees, that new cohort, and have them meet on a regular basis. That will yield higher performance, longer retention, more productivity. And someone just they're hired and get to your job, right? No, you gotta let people, basically mentorship, virtual mentorship is so critical. It doesn't have to be forever. It can taper off as time goes on, but it's really important in the beginning. And also allowing people to unplug, right? Showing people right from the first 30 days that they're allowed to disconnect, right? And not have every week be, heavy work. Like this week for me, I'm having a lighter week. So I've had a number of weeks that have been really intense. And then I show that to the team. Hey, it's okay to have some weeks that are chill. This week I'm doing this webinar this week. I have one other goal for this week, but instead of having 5 to 10 goals, I have 2 goals this week. I'm taking tomorrow off to celebrate my birthday and my friend's birthday. We're going to be out in nature. So allowing people to unplug is really important. Awesome. So let's talk about KPIs. I was listening to NPR not so long ago, and almost every job description says we're looking for, data-driven people, data experts, data this, data that. Well, I think for a lot of us, we grew up kind of being afraid of things like math and data. Like it seems complicated, right? But it is important. So you want to be able to, communicate. It's okay if you're new at KPIs. It's okay to be new at data. But with the advent of generative AI, data has never been easier. As long as you're doing that data entry, now it's more important to do data entry. For instance, on our team, we have a scorecard. Every week we look at our scorecard. You should have a hiring scorecard, right? Things like how long it take to fill the role. What is the candidate drop off? What is the quality of hire? Record these things, and then you can adjust over time. Your leaders will love you. If they ever want to say, hey, how's it going with hiring? Take a look at our scorecard. And then you can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Gemini to do an analysis, provide graphs, provide analysis. Microsoft Power BI, by the way, is about to be a thing of the past. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of some of these metrics you see on the screen. I want to mention that Gallup's engagement research links engagement to turnover and productivity outcomes. Buffer's work on remote career growth shows why visibility and opportunity metrics matter. Don't just do the net promoter score mentioned earlier, also fairness, manager quality, new hire connection. These are things you should be surveying in the first 30, 60, 90 days. Awesome, rounding it out here. So I just want to touch on a simple summary. Remote hybrid companies win when they hire people leaders who can build systems for clarity, fairness, connection, and of course, manager excellence. So research shows that, Gallup shows that engagement and managers matter incredibly. It's so important for outcomes. Stanford shows that, in their research, that hybrid can improve retention without harming performance when done correctly. And as I mentioned, Buffer shows remote workers still struggle with visibility and loneliness and boundaries. So we gotta help support these people and through systems. Like for instance, on our team, we do a bi-weekly or bi-monthly, monthly team building exercise. So, you want to teach your managers how to have those team building exercises, not just simply go around the room and tell us something that nobody knows about you. That's boring. It can be so much more interesting. Like for instance, here in the chat, Jess, my colleague Jess, she ran the monthly event this month, and she gave people it was a debate basically. She gave someone a position on a topic, and then you had to debate it. Like one of them was debating the 4-day work week, pro and against, and going through it. It was really fun, right? It was really cool. So research is really it shows that it's so important to do these things, reduce loneliness, increase visibility, and allow for boundaries. So thanks everybody for coming. Let's wrap it up with any questions that we have. Jess, do we have any questions from the group?
We do not have any questions at the moment. However, the floor is open. If anyone does have questions, pop them into chat and I'll make sure to ask Alex for you.
Awesome. Unless there's any questions before everyone heads out for the rest of the day, just want to touch on, we're going to be doing a live demo. It's going to be coming up, and also, let's see, is it the next slide? I'm just going to just quickly check here, please. Right, yeah, so we do a live demo. I gave a little sneak peek on Recognize. If you'd like to come to a group demo, it's really fun. You can enter to win a raffle for a $100 gift card. Also, $1,000 that goes into rewards. So the total rewards budget is always mostly in the rewards, but obviously a little bit on our subscription with something like Recognize. We try to keep our costs down so that you can put most of that budget towards rewards. But if you sign up with us for the webinar, we'll be giving a $1,000 reward credit. So come to that live demo. It's on the 28th. And then David also is going to be doing a webinar. I'll be helping out as well. I'll be there next week. Gamification engagement model, designing culture people actually participate in. Designing culture people actually participate in. So come to that next week. It's on Thursday, just like today. And I can't wait to go through it with David. It's going to be really fun. Gamification is a ton of fun, obviously. It makes the workplace a lot more fun, and you get more output through it as well. So come to that next week. We do webinars almost every week, and we do ones just for our customers, but we also do ones for you all too. So the community. So because Recognize is always improving every month. If you have a subscription, if you buy HR tools and you have a subscription that you pay every month or every year, you should expect to see those get better every month, every year. So that's something important to us. Awesome. We have a question. Daisy asks, do you have any higher education institutions or systems that use Recognize? I had to check. I know we had University of Sydney in Australia use Recognize. I know that higher education oftentimes has limited budgets. We have some ways to really help you save money on that. So reach out to us. We can talk to you about some ways of going about. A lot of our customers actually, not a lot, but I would say a third of our customers use Recognize entirely as a gamification platform. They don't have rewards or gift cards or Amazon in there. They just use the gamification, and you can have incredible success through that when you have leadership buy-in. It's so important when leaders are reinforcing that recognition program on a monthly basis, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. So Daisy, I'd love to talk to you more about your role, your college or university or wherever you work, and love to talk to you more about how to use Recognize for that college environment. Awesome. Without further ado, I guess we will be closing the call. And thanks everybody for coming. And thanks for being with me for this hour. Take care.